Hey everyone! If this happened to you, would you confront the person directly or cut them out and move on? Comment confront or move on. And tell us why. Now, let's hear what happened. My dad stabbed a piece of roast beef, looked right at me, and said, I always figured Claire'd retire early. What was it? Logistics? Something like that? I was sitting at the far end of the table in his little house outside Enid, Oklahoma, wearing the same navy blazer I always wore to make myself feel like I belonged in a room. The Sunday roast was dry, the conversation, drier. I managed a smile and said, I'm still working. That didn't even register. He'd already turned to my brother Tom, who was swirling bourbon in his glass, like he'd invented flight himself. Now, Tom, Dad said, like a talk show host setting up his guest. This guy's flying international now. Captain Stanton, what is it now? Berlin last week? Tom grinned and leaned back. Yeah, Berlin Tuesday, Houston Thursday. They keep me moving. His wife laughed. He never stops. I swear, sometimes I think he lives in the air. Man was always built for pressure, Dad said proudly. Even back in high school, remember that fourth quarter drive against Ponca City? He pointed a steak knife at me like it was a microphone. Claire, you were there. I nodded, same fake smile glued on. Sure was. Of course you were. Tom cut in, smirking. You kept the stats, right? That got a chuckle around the table. Even I laughed a little. But something tightened in my chest. She never had the spine for the field, Tom added. No offense. I shrugged. None taken. I reached for the green beans. My hand shook slightly. Quick note, before we go any further, share which city or country you're watching from. I mean, Claire's always been good with tech stuff, right? Dad said. Waving a fork like that explained everything. Spreadsheets, computers, support roles. Every team needs those. My smile stayed frozen. Like always, I kept the truth locked up where no one could twist it. Tom turned to me. You still doing that same thing? Systems, admin? Something like that, I said. That was the safe answer. Easier than explaining interagency crisis coordination, or what it feels like to quietly shut down an entire cyber attack with 2 minutes to spare. Dad topped off Tom's glass. Different kinds of success, I guess. But flying? That's real responsibility. Whole plane full of lives. I nodded like I agreed, like I hadn't carried bigger stakes for 2 straight decades. Tom raised his glass. To doing what we're meant to do. I lifted mine too. Didn't sip, just held it up and watched them toast each other. Inside, I bit down the words that had been buried for years. Outside, the crickets were louder than the people who raised me. That was about 31 years ago, but I still remember the heat from that barbecue pit like it was yesterday. I was 17, balancing a stack of paper plates slick with baked bean sauce, trying not to trip over a hose rolled out across the gravel. The volunteer firehouse fundraiser was always packed. Mostly old guys in denim shirts talking trucks, smoke, and football. The kind of place where nobody looked twice at a girl clearing tables. My dad stood near the grill, beer in hand, loud like always. Tom's got that arm, he was saying to the fire chief. College scouts have already been sniffing around. Kid could throw across a cornfield blindfolded. The chief nodded, chewing on a rib. That boy's got power. Somebody asked, and your daughter? Dad didn't miss a beat. Claire's smart, good with computers. Probably be a secretary someday. She's organized like her mom was. I was 10 feet away, just close enough to hear it. I didn't flinch, just dumped the plates in the trash, wiped my hands on my jeans, and kept moving. That summer, I found a flyer shoved in the back corner of the high school guidance office, Homeland Youth Initiative, Federal Academy Prep Program. It was plain white with a tiny flag logo in the corner. Most kids ignored it. I took it home, stuffed it under my mattress, and filled it out at night after work. I didn't tell anybody. Not my friends, not my teachers, and sure as hell not my dad. A month later, I sat in a folding chair in Tulsa in front of 2 federal reps asking me why I applied. I don't like panic, I said. I like fixing things before people even know there's a problem. They looked at each other, a little surprised. One asked for an example. So I told them about the time my chemistry teacher froze up before a field trip. The bus driver hadn't shown, the head count was off, the lunch delivery was late. Everyone stood around like they were waiting for an adult to appear. I was 16 and tired of watching people spin, so I split the list, called the backup driver myself, found 2 missing kids in the parking lot, and had the group out the door in 20 minutes. The woman taking notes just nodded. You like pressure. I like when pressure doesn't win. I got the acceptance letter 2 weeks later. I opened it alone in the laundry room and sat on top of the dryer while my hands shook. When I told Dad, he didn't even look up from the newspaper. That some government scholarship thing? It's a nomination pipeline for the Federal Response Academy, I said. Might not be for you, he muttered. Lot of rough types in that world. And if it doesn't work out, well, you've always got a place here. That was his version of support. I didn't bother arguing. He saw me the way he wanted to. Safe, quiet, not too far. I just nodded and walked out of the room. Didn't say thanks, didn't say anything. Later that night, I folded the acceptance letter into my notebook. Not the fancy kind, just a regular spiral one from Walmart. I didn't need to frame it. I needed it to stay sharp, close, easy to reach. No big speech, no dramatic vow. Just a quiet, solid line drawn in my head. If I couldn't get recognition, I'd settle for impact. I wouldn't prove anything with talk. I'd prove it by being the one they called when everything was about to go to hell. And one day, they'd know. I reported to the Federal Response Academy in Georgia, the same way I'd cleared those plates at the firehouse. Quiet, efficient, and unnoticed. The campus sat behind a chain-link perimeter just outside Augusta. No big signs, no fancy gates. Just a laminated badge, a number, and a cold dorm room with a metal desk and no distractions. That was fine by me. I didn't come for comfort. I came to build something nobody could ignore. First week in, they dropped us into orientation drills that chewed people up. Map reviews, terrain equations, incident simulations, all with alarms blaring and lights flashing like hell was on a countdown. Some of the recruits thrived on noise. I learned to work beneath it. While others yelled orders and played hero, I tracked patterns, timelines, gaps, things that slipped through when egos got too loud. We had an instructor named Maxwell, retired analyst from the old Intel side, glasses held together by tape, wore the same brown tie every day. First time I saw him, I figured he'd be boring. I was wrong. He stood in front of our class one night after a hurricane coordination sim and said, "The best outcome is nothing happening at all. You want applause? Wrong job. You want silence? That's your win. Remember that." That stuck. Real victories weren't headlines. They were failures that never happened. I wasn't top of the class, not even close. I didn't have the swagger, didn't kiss ass, didn't chase medals. But I never dropped the ball. I was the one they plugged in when things got shaky. I kept the board stable. My rotations were brutal and I loved them. Midnight dispatch drills where we had to reroute air support in under 3 minutes. 12-hour simulations where one wrong entry could cost 500 imaginary lives. Some cracked under pressure. I didn't. I breathed easier when the stakes got high. I learned to read silence like a language, watching data feeds for glitches nobody else noticed. Weird delays, repeated requests, the signal behind the noise. While others chased recognition, I hunted problems. Clean, invisible victories. That was my thing. I wrote nothing home, took no photos, just kept a small notebook with names, numbers, and fragments of moments that mattered to me. Things that reminded me why I was there. By the time graduation came around, I had 3 offers in front of me: systems ops, cyber prevention, or interagency response. I picked the one with the least glory and the most risk: critical systems coordination, the part of the machine nobody thinks about until it breaks. The ceremony was small. We stood in rows, got handshakes, walked off stage. No parents, no cameras, just a quiet folder handed over and the next assignment sealed inside. That night, I called home. Dad answered, chewing something. "Tom got his pilot's license," he said before I could even speak. "Passed on his first try. That boy's going places." I waited. He didn't ask how my graduation went. So I said, "I've been assigned to critical systems coordination." He paused. "So, still computers?" "Something like that." "Good. That suits you. You were always better behind the scenes." I could have argued. Could have told him what that actually meant. Coordinating comm grids, routing mobile operations, building the frameworks that kept disaster teams from falling apart under pressure. Instead, I said, "Yeah, I like it." "Long as you're happy," he said, and hung up. I sat on my bed, still in uniform, folder in my lap, and stared at the blank wall in front of me. I didn't need him to understand. I just needed to make sure when the next thing broke, I'd be the one holding the system together before anyone even noticed the crack. I packed the folder the next morning and never looked back. From then on, it was 2 decades of field offices, temporary desks, and government-issued apartments with beige carpets and bad lighting. No fanfare, no titles anyone outside the system would recognize. Just codes, maps, and deadlines that couldn't miss. I bounced between federal hubs, Denver, Sacramento, Atlanta, sometimes DC, wherever the signals got weird or the chatter didn't add up. I spent more time inside ops trailers and data vaults than my own bed. Didn't bother with plants, didn't hang pictures. I wasn't building a life. I was holding the line. My job? Spot the thing that could collapse everything and kill it before it got loud. False alarms were easy. Wildfire reports triggered by sun glare on a traffic cam, gas leaks that turned out to be prank calls. Those were the good days. The bad days came when things didn't look wrong until they were. That's where I lived. Like the winter we traced a rail manifest to a stolen hazmat ID before a train hit Chicago. Or the power substation in Arizona that glitched just long enough to signal someone was testing the grid, someone smart enough to make it look like rust. We found it. Quietly, fixed it, quietly, no headlines. Just one more page in my unmarked file. And I kept my own list, not names of cities or missions, but people. Coworkers who showed up when it mattered. Who didn't blink when I said, "We've got 30 minutes." I wrote their names in a small leather notebook I never let out of arm's reach. Some of them didn't last. Burnout, divorce, breakdowns. This job didn't take people. It wore them down until they faded. I stayed because someone had to be the one who didn't flinch. At holidays, I flew back to Oklahoma. Thanksgiving was always the same. Stale stuffing, too much gravy, and Dad in his recliner holding court like the damn mayor of rural America. One year, he looked up between bites and said, "You still doing that office work thing? Data stuff?" I nodded. "Still at it." "Good, good," he muttered, already turning to Tom. "Now your brother. He just logged his 10,000th hour in the air. That boy's got wings." Tom chuckled and poured himself another drink. "Flight ops over Guam last month. Whole mess of delays, but I kept us moving." Dad beamed. "That's command. That's responsibility." I picked up my green beans and didn't say a word. I could have told them I'd rerouted evac teams from a bomb threat in Vegas the week before. I could have told them I'd slept 2 hours in 3 days. But I didn't. The silence used to feel like armor. By then, it felt like weight. Something I carried through every toast, every family photo where Tom stood front and center, and I was somewhere in the back holding someone's coat. I wasn't invisible. I was buried under the noise of someone easier to celebrate. Still, I kept showing up. On call, on time, on edge. Because if something slipped through while I was chasing validation, people would pay for it. That wasn't an option. No one clapped. No one asked. I didn't need them to. But every year, the silence got a little heavier. 3 days before Christmas, I was 47 hours into a pattern review inside a federal comms outpost near Arlington. I'd been staring at relays and diagnostics for 2 nights straight when I caught a sequence that didn't line up. Data packets coming in too clean, too synced. Looked like noise on the surface, but I'd seen this trick before. Masked redundancy. Someone was mimicking a backup line to intercept communications. The system was feeding itself fake stability. The timing was brutal. A foreign diplomatic summit was scheduled that weekend in DC. 6 embassies, 2 secretaries of state, and enough targets to light up every security agency on the grid. If that line failed mid-summit, it wouldn't just be chaos. It'd be seen as a coordinated act, and if the power grid buckled under that pressure, we'd be answering to every ally and every enemy at once. I flagged it, alerted cross-agency, pushed for a blackout sim. Most shrugged it off at first. Tech glitch, they said. So I bypassed 3 protocols and shut the whole channel down myself. Pulled the trigger at 4:19 a.m. We lost 6 non-critical nodes for 9 minutes, but we held the core. The summit ran without a hiccup. Nobody even noticed. That's how I knew I was right. An hour later, a special task force swept in and took over the patch job. They gave a polished debrief. Their rep stood in front of 6 departments and explained how they proactively adjusted for system inconsistencies. Press got wind of it, called it a preemptive systems rehearsal. Their badge, their words, their credit. My name never came up. I didn't stick around. I flew out that same night, headed back to Oklahoma for the holiday. The second I walked into Dad's living room, I knew what kind of night it'd be. Tom was posted up by the fireplace, glass of Blanton's in one hand, his new pilot wings pinned to his blazer like he'd just come back from saving the country himself. "Promoted to senior command," he said when I hugged him. "Captain Stanton, long haul ops, Europe rotation, cheers to me." Everyone clapped. My niece blew one of those cheap paper party horns. Dad poured more bourbon. I dropped my bag by the couch and sat down, coat still on. They passed around meatballs and deviled eggs while Tom ran through his flight schedule. Frankfurt to Chicago with engine warning lights, still made touchdown 5 minutes early. You either have it or you don't. Dad laughed like it was the punchline of the year. That's what I'm talking about. Not everybody's built to lead under pressure. I reached for the sweet potatoes, handed them to the left without a word. One of Dad's neighbors, Marlene something, leaned in and asked, "And what about you, Claire? You still working with computers?" Before I could answer, Dad chuckled. "She's good with data, helps out behind the scenes, quiet work. Important, though." Marlene nodded like that explained everything. "Well, we need people like that, too." I looked right at her and smiled. "Sure do." But inside something cracked. Not loud, just final. I'd spent years pulling this country back from the brink, with no sleep, no glory, and no margin for error. I'd held systems together with duct tape and spit while people like Tom got speeches and drinks for getting wheels off the runway on time. I was done watching them toast the wrong heroes. I was done being quiet so everyone else could feel louder. Later that night, I stood in Dad's hallway, staring at the old shelf by the front door. It had Tom's high school football trophy, his flight certificate, a photo of him in uniform. There wasn't a single thing of mine up there. Not one. That's when I knew. I didn't need space on the shelf. I needed the room to stop pretending I wasn't the one keeping the lights on. I flew back to DC the day after Christmas, still wearing the same black coat I'd had since 2012. I didn't unpack, didn't even take off my boots. Just dropped my bag and kicked the door shut with my heel. There it was, sitting on the floor like it had been shoved under the door with some urgency. Plain white envelope, no return address, just one stamp and my name printed dead center in block letters. Claire Stanton, director's eyes only. I opened it with a steak knife from the sink. Inside, a single folded letter and a classified packet. My breath caught halfway down the page. Project Atlas, National Response Joint Operation. Lead coordinator, Claire Stanton. I read it again, then a third time. No mistake. They weren't offering me a seat at the table. They were handing me the keys. The next morning, I sat across from Director Vale in a soundproof meeting room at the main operations hub, 2 floors below street level. No windows, one fluorescent light, no small talk. He slid a tablet toward me. "You've been selected to lead Atlas. Public face. Full honors." I looked at the screen, then back at him. "Why me?" "Because you've been running this country's defense systems without a microphone for 20 years, he said. "It's time people knew who's been holding the damn rope." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I wanted the rope visible. He leaned in, elbows on the table. "No more back row, no more silence. This one's forward-facing. Press conferences, cameras, briefings. You don't get to disappear after this." My first instinct was to push back. Let someone else take the podium. I didn't need spotlights. I needed results. He must have seen it in my face. "You don't get to hide behind modesty now, Claire," he said. "You want command? You wear it." I swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." When I got home, I pulled the garment bag from the back of my closet. It had been zipped up for years, issued to me during a previous high-clearance standby op that never went public. I'd never worn it. I laid it across the bed and pulled the zipper down slowly, the metal teeth clicking like a countdown. Dark navy, heavy fabric, pressed smooth, no dust. Near the collar, 3 stars. Real ones. Not symbolic, not honorary. National command. I held it by the shoulders, studied it in the soft lamplight. My hands weren't steady. Then I pulled it on. The weight was different than I expected. Not just physical. It hit harder than the Kevlar vest I wore during the train threat in Detroit. This wasn't gear. This was declaration. I picked up the rank pins and turned them in my palm. There was no audience, no applause, no one watching. Just me, my breath, and the quiet final click of metal against fabric as I pinned each star in place. Earned, not given. I looked in the mirror. Didn't smile. Didn't adjust anything. Just nodded once. It was time. The uniform didn't get easier to wear the second time, but this time I zipped it up without hesitation. No hiding. No deflection. I walked into the Federal Command Auditorium 30 minutes before the briefing. The room was built like a small arena. Low light, steel walls, raised tier seating. Government officials, emergency liaisons, military brass, regional directors. All of them filling in row by row. 100 suits and uniforms, murmuring about logistics and contingency codes. My boots echoed across the floor as I stepped to the side platform. No one paid me much attention, not yet. Tom was already seated at the front table, flipping through his notes like a man prepping for a TED Talk. He wore his flight uniform, badges polished, tie perfect, face confident. He didn't see me at first, but when he did, he froze for a second, just a flicker, then gave me a nod, like we were equals sharing a job site. Dad sat behind him, a few rows up, tan windbreaker, coffee in hand. His eyes moved slow, scanning the setup. He didn't see me. The room settled. Director Vale stepped up to the podium. No warm-up. Today's briefing is for command-level officials and interagency leads only, he said. No press. No observers. What we discuss here doesn't leave this room. People sat straighter. We are now entering active protocol phase for Project Atlas, he continued. Our response operation will be coordinated under federal authority. Captain Thomas Stanton will begin with an overview of the aerial mobilization plan. Tom stood and approached the mic, confident, steady. Thank you, Director, he began. As you all know, air logistics are the backbone of any rapid deployment. For this mission, I've been assisting in designing the core movement structure, regional dispatch, international clearance, fuel contingencies. He talked clean, used the right words. Let his voice linger a half second too long on the phrase operational leadership. It was subtle, but the message was clear. I'm the guy in the seat. When he wrapped, there was polite nodding, a few notes scribbled. He stepped back and looked at Vale. The director didn't pause. Project Atlas will be commanded by National Response Director Claire Stanton. The room didn't move. It was like someone hit pause on the entire auditorium. I stood up. Every head turned. People blinked like they'd just heard the name wrong. Tom's mouth opened, then shut again. His face lost all color. His hand gripped the edge of the table like he needed something solid. Dad stared straight ahead. I stepped to the podium, slow and certain. Good morning, I said. Effective immediately, I am assuming operational command of Project Atlas under full federal directive. The sound of pens stopping mid-scratch filled the space. Here's where we stand, I continued. We're operating on a 12-hour activation clock. Ground teams are pre-positioned. Comm integrity is verified hourly. Power redundancy is tiered at 3 levels. If any single point fails, we reroute, not retreat. I clicked to the next slide. Maps, routes, assets. This is not a drill. This is not prep. We are in the zone. You will speak clearly, move fast, and check your egos at the door. My desk takes final say on all red line calls. Anyone who can't work inside that structure needs to walk now. Nobody walked. I outlined the next 3 phases: interagency sync, asset lock, and activation deployment. No fluff, no filler. Any questions can be directed to the operations staff outside this room. We're done here. I stepped back. For half a second, nothing. Then the first row of military brass stood, then the next. Within moments, the entire auditorium was on its feet, all except one. Tom was still seated, staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, hands folded in his lap like they didn't know what else to do. Dad sat behind him, elbows on his knees, mouth open slightly. They didn't clap. No one did. They didn't have to. Their silence said more than noise ever could. I stepped off the auditorium platform and took the back exit through the side hallway, shoulders tight, pulse steady. The briefing was done, but I knew that wasn't the end of it. Sure enough, I heard the footsteps before I turned the corner. Claire, Tom's voice, sharper than usual. He caught up, one hand gripping his badge lanyard like it might hold him up. I kept walking. Claire, stop. I stopped. He looked like he didn't know what to say first. His jaw flexed, then his eyes darted down the hallway like he needed backup. You didn't think to tell me, he said. You've been doing this kind of work for how long? I folded my arms. You never asked. He blinked. That took some of the wind out of him. You're my sister. And you've been flying planes and giving speeches since we were teenagers, I said. You never once asked what I actually did. His tone shifted, defensive. Because I didn't know there was anything to ask. You never said a word. You think I could? I stepped closer. You think I could waltz into Thanksgiving and start listing out threats I neutralized or names of field ops I coordinated? You think I had clearance to talk about how close this country came to breaking more times than anyone knows? His face fell just slightly. You're telling me you've been running things like this the whole time. I've been behind half the systems that kept your flight routes clear, When someone flagged them for potential sabotage, I said, I've rerouted evac teams during live fire exercises. I've watched false flag cyber attacks unfold in real time and had to decide in 30 seconds if it was a glitch or an act of war. He stared at me like I was someone he'd never met. I've walked into more silent rooms and carried more responsibility without recognition than you could imagine. And every year you asked if I was still doing spreadsheets. He didn't speak. A group of aides passed at the end of the hall. Neither of us moved. Finally, his voice dropped. I never gave you credit. I didn't say you didn't deserve to. I didn't say too late now. I didn't need to. I just nodded. Now you see it. He nodded once, then again, then looked away like he couldn't hold eye contact any longer. I left him there, didn't wait for a goodbye. Later that night, I got back to my apartment, kicked off my boots, didn't turn on the TV. Just sat at the kitchen table with my elbows on the wood and my head in my hands. My phone buzzed. Text from Dad. I'm proud of you. 4 words. That's it. I stared at the screen for a long time. Didn't reply, not yet. A few weeks later, I was back in Oklahoma. Same dirt road, same mailbox that leaned a little to the left, same smell of motor oil and burned coffee floating from the kitchen. But something was different this time. Dad didn't meet me at the door like usual. I let myself in, hung my coat, and followed the smell of roast and garlic to the dining room. The table was already set. Tom was pouring water. His wife stacked napkins. Dad was at the head of the table, thumbing through a folded-up paper, but he looked up when I walked in. Hey, Claire, he said, like I'd just come back from the grocery store. How's your team holding up after the Denver scramble? I blinked. They're solid, working overtime on coastal prep, but holding the line. He nodded. Good. That last stop ran tight. Tom didn't say anything. He just pulled out my chair and passed me the basket of rolls. We ate without the usual wall of flight stories. No reruns of Tom's layovers. No jokes about TSA lines or plane food. He talked some, weather, housing costs, mild stuff, but nothing that filled the whole room. Halfway through dinner, my niece Ellie looked up from her mashed potatoes. Aunt Claire, do you run stuff for real? I smiled. Yeah, I do. Her eyes lit up like I just told her I could fly. Cool, she said, then went back to eating like it was the most normal answer in the world. Tom passed the potatoes without a word. I didn't need a speech. I didn't need a toast. That silence, that lack of commentary, meant more than any praise I could have wrung out of them before. After dinner, I helped clear plates like always. Nothing flashy, just muscle memory. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw him. Dad was standing by the shelf next to the coat rack, dust rag in one hand, glasses slipping down his nose. He didn't say anything, just picked up the framed photo of Tom in uniform, scooted it over, and set another frame right next to it. Me, in command blues. He adjusted the angle so the light caught both photos evenly, looked at it for half a second, then walked past me toward the kitchen like he hadn't just rewritten 30 years of family dynamics in one move. I didn't follow him. I stood there, stared at those 2 pictures, and took one deep breath. That frame didn't fix everything, didn't erase the years, but it said, I see you now. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. I flew back to DC that night. No welcome committee, no ceremony, just me and the late train from the airport, my boots wet from sleet, and my bag heavier than usual. My apartment smelled like stale coffee and paper. I didn't turn on the TV, just dropped my keys on the counter and walked straight to the shelf above my desk. There was a single frame sitting dead center. No medals, no flag, just a note, handwritten on the back of an old field log. Thanks for showing us how to see in the dark. A junior agent gave it to me 3 years ago after her first rotation. She cracked under pressure the first month, thought she'd be pulled. I sat with her through a double shift, made her run silent drills until she stopped flinching at alerts. She stayed. She got better. That note never moved. I had 100 like her, people who found out the hard way that saving lives rarely came with applause. I didn't need speeches. I didn't need my name carved into a plaque. I had my list. Real people. Real outcomes. They got to go home because I stayed in the chair. That's what counted. I used to wonder what legacy meant. Now I knew. It wasn't being remembered. It was making sure systems ran right when you were no longer there to fix them. Weeks later, I was standing at the front of a cold training room, walking new recruits through failure chain simulations. One of them, young, fresh-pressed, raised her hand halfway through the session. Ma'am, she said, Do you ever wish you were more visible? I didn't hesitate. Visibility doesn't hold the line, I said. People do. She nodded, then looked back down at her chart. No follow-up. She didn't need one. That night, I walked home through the Capital District. Wind was low, sky dark but clear. The dome was lit like always, steady, quiet, unshaken. I passed a tour group standing near the monuments. No one looked at me. No one knew my name. I liked it that way. I reached my block, turned the corner, and kept walking. No spotlight, no flash. Just one foot in front of the other. Exactly how I wanted it.